the morning, light rain started, and by noon, the sky was covered with clouds. Judy kept glancing out the window every 5 minutes. It feels like it's going to snow any moment. I hope we can make it to the cemetery, Judy said. The friend of the deceased mother talked about funerals as if they were a routine matter, and Clarice found this casual approach irritating. And Judy, please, not like that, Clarice implored. The woman reacted instantly. Clarice, how should I talk about it? I don't know, but definitely not like this. Don't you dare tell me what to do, dear. It's you who abandoned your mother. You didn't even respond when I wrote to you about Carrie's deteriorating health. And Judy, I've told you many times that I moved to a different address long ago, so I didn't receive your letter, Clarice explained. There were several deep sighs. You keep moving back and forth, always searching for a better place. Your mother did the same throughout her life. Look at what it led her to. She's still so young, she could have enjoyed more of her life. Judy expressed her opinion with clear disapproval rather than sympathy for the deceased. But remembering the traditions, she crossed herself and cautiously looked towards the large room where Carrie's body lay on chairs next to a table with an icon, and candles were crackling in front of it. They're burning out. We should light new ones, Judy said. Clarice responded calmly. The funeral agency will be here in half an hour, so there's no point in wasting candles. We need to take some to the cemetery. The priest promised to arrive at 1 o'clock. Judy was indignant. Nothing is going as it should. And why spend money when our local men could have dug the grave for a couple of bottles of liquor? Or do you want to make it look grand? Clarice struggled to contain her irritation. And Judy, I just want to give my mother a proper send-off. Maybe I paid for it, but I'm confident that the agency's staff will do their job well. Judy raised her voice as well. So, our men aren't worthy of your approval. Clarice didn't miss the opportunity to be snide. On the contrary, they are too good at this part. So a couple of bottles won't cut it for them. And Judy, I don't want to turn the funeral into a spectacle. We know how it goes. First people mourn, and then they start enjoying themselves. As for the money, please be more careful with your comments. Those times when everyone told me what to do are long gone. Judy pursed her lips in offense and started checking the prepared bags. Clarice, will you visit Grandma? Judy asked. Uncle Jack will bring her. At least, he promised. But you know Grandma, Clarice replied. And Judy then asked calmly, I know. Glory often changes her mind. Today she wants one thing, and tomorrow she wants something else. Clarice, forgive me, but I have to ask, what are you going to do with the house? Clarice had no more patience to be upset. And Judy, I think it's impolite to discuss such matters while the host is still in the house. The woman grinned. Well, she's the deceased. What can she do now? She doesn't care how you handle the house. You're the sole heir after all. Clarice, if you ever decide to sell the house, don't forget about Aunt Judy. We've been friends with your mother for so many years. Clarice, too outraged to find the right words, was interrupted as the funeral team arrived at that very moment. The drivers and the head of the funeral company took charge of the process. Come on, folks, let's move faster, or a storm will hit us any minute. Look how the sky has filled with clouds, the leader said. The men quickly loaded the casket into the hearse, and the chief instructed the women, ladies, please get into the car. Our guys at the cemetery are freezing. The cemetery was 5 kilometers away, situated on a wind-swept plain, and the participants of the funeral ceremony quickly grew cold. As Judy had promised, snowflakes soon swirled above the mourners, and the late friend's companion suddenly shed a tear, saying, Carrie, you never wanted to leave us in winter. In the same tone, Grandma Gloria, whom her eldest son supported, continued, Sweetie, why did you leave this world before me? How am I supposed to live alone now, when you're not here, and never will be again? After mourning, the women looked at Clarice expectantly, awaiting her speech. However, the deceased daughter didn't shed a tear. She bent over the deceased and whispered something. Grandma Gloria pushed her granddaughter from behind. Kiss your mother. Say a proper goodbye. Clarice glanced at her grandmother, rendering her speechless. She was the first to head to her uncle's car and took a seat in the back. Soon, Grandma and Aunt Judy approached the car. The latter decided to express her opinion. I'm sorry for meddling in your affairs, but only scoundrels act this way. Clarice, I'm telling you, your mother passed away. She's no more, understand? You will never be able to talk to her again. She'll never hug you again. Clarice felt a burning inside. And Judy, please, don't pry into my feelings. It's better if you stay quiet for now, she said. Gloria muttered quietly, yes, when it comes to the deceased, you should either speak well or remain silent. Clarice glanced at her grandmother with gratitude. A heavy silence filled the car, and they all drove back home without uttering a word. The funeral passed quietly and without unnecessary words. Judy sadly remarked, I prepared so much. I stood by the stove all night, and no one came. Even the neighbors didn't want to pay their respects to the departed. After a glass of spirits, Gloria spoke a bet. Only those who respect you come. Carrie had disagreements with everyone during her lifetime. Even though she was my daughter, I love it when everything is fair. So, that was her destiny. Clarice had heard such statements many times in her short life. But their meaning only truly hit her after the funeral of the woman who had given birth to her. Despite her name, Carrie bore little resemblance to a source of love and tenderness. While she was familiar with the feeling of caring, she bestowed it on anyone except her only daughter. Clarice's earliest childhood memories were of constant disputes between her mother and grandmother. Gloria considered it her duty to control her headstrong daughter. She usually appeared at the most inconvenient moment for Carrie and started reproaching her. Carrie, what are you doing? I'm ashamed to walk down the street now. People point their fingers at me. Carrie's responses were typically confrontational. Mom, I don't understand what I've got to do with it. They're pointing fingers at you. Maybe you dress strangely or go out without fixing yourself up. Tensions would escalate, and the grandmother would respond harshly. Are you mocking me? It's all right. You'll get what's coming to you someday. Local women have been gossiping and bearing a grudge against you for a long time. The day will come when they'll all gang up on you or hire someone to do it. Such assumptions amused Carrie, and she responded with either laughter or blatant mockery. I don't see anything wrong with temporarily using someone else's man. Shut up, shameless one. At least you should have some shame for your daughter's sake. As for myself, I'll keep quiet. Strangely, the presence of a child during their arguments didn't seem to bother either of the women. And every time, Gloria would invariably mention Clarice's father. I'm still amazed at how Alex put up with you for so many years. Such a good man, a family man, built a huge house himself. Live and be grateful. No, a normal life didn't suit you. You were always drawn to adventures. That's why he couldn't stand it, and let him go. Alex was even worse than you, always nagging me. I hope he found the right woman for himself, and, most importantly, a very decent one. After all, in his eyes, I was fallen, unworthy of his pure love as a woman. As for Clarice, I have nothing to say. I'm doing my best for her. I'm raising my daughter without any outside help. Indeed, little Clarice lacked nothing. Carrie held the position of the post office manager and earned a good salary. Her numerous lovers were not ordinary laborers either. After her official divorce from Clarice's father, the woman preferred secret rendezvous at a country house or a hotel for a long time. She frequently changed her lovers. While her mother was enjoying herself, the girl was under her grandmother's watchful eye. When tired but content Carrie came to retrieve her child, Gloria couldn't hide her disgust and said, Well, did the night go well? Heaven forbid you bring disease into the house. Mom, why do you talk nonsense like that? Maybe I'm searching for my happiness in this way. All wise people claim that it can only be found through trial and error. So, I'm trying, Carrie responded. As the years went by, The woman completely shed any shame and began bringing her lovers home. However, she changed her tactics drastically and focused on divorced men or widowers. From Gloria's conversations, Clarice understood that her grandmother's worst prophecy had still come true. Someone from the embittered women had beaten the post office manager. Carrie spent nearly 2 weeks at home because her face and body were covered in bruises. She calmed down for a few months, but her nature, as her grandmother put it, demanded its own, and Carrie plunged back into her reckless affairs. This time, her growing daughter was also involved. Clarice couldn't recall the names of all her mother's temporary husbands, but some individuals left a strong impression. When she was about 12, her mother brought Paul, the father of one of her classmates, into the house. At first, Clarice thought he had come to discuss the constant disputes between the schoolgirls. Since the first grade, Clarice had not had the best relationship with Victoria McDowell, Paul's daughter. However, the man didn't even hint at the girls' conflicts. He praised the host's daughter right from the doorstep. "Carrie, you have an amazing daughter. My daughter told me that she sings well and possesses a multitude of other talents." Clarice didn't believe this man because she sang terribly and had no friends in her class. To prevent the guest from misleading her mother, the girl expressed herself frankly. "It's not nice to lie. Victoria and I are enemies, and she couldn't have said that." The girl turned and headed to her room, leaving the guest flustered. Her mother followed her. "Clarice, stop. How do you talk to your elders?" Her mother scolded her. The girl retorted, "I talk to them as I should." She slammed the door and didn't come out of her room the entire evening. The next day, Paul moved his things in with them. Her mother warned her, "Uncle Paul will be living with us now, and I demand respect from you." "Mom, respect has to be earned." The war with her new stepfather continued for more than 2 years. Then one fine day, Clarice came home from school and joyfully discovered that Uncle Paul's belongings, along with him, had disappeared. Carrie didn't mourn alone for long and, a couple of months later, brought in Uncle Andrew. He was a quiet, entirely harmless man who had lost his wife and son several years ago. Clarice liked him right away because he didn't act macho. But Uncle Andrew had one significant flaw. He loved to drink, and her mother couldn't stand alcoholics. Clarice felt sorry for this very lonely man, who she wanted to call her father. Uncle Andrew could do everything. He repaired furniture, rewired the house, and even set up a garden. But after a hard day's work, he would secretly start drinking. He never got rowdy, though. He would retire to the bedroom and stay there until the next morning. A few times, Clarice begged him, saying, "Uncle Andrew, please don't drink. You're very good, and I don't want Mom to kick you out." The man listened to the girl and thanked her for her kind words, saying, "Clarice, I want to be a father to you too. I'm trying to overcome my problem, but the habit is stronger than me. It's like it's my destiny." As if sensing trouble, the girl began asking her mother, "Mom, Uncle Andrew is really unwell. Let's help him. After all, they treat such illnesses today." But her daughter's heartfelt request didn't touch her mother's heart. She said with disdain, "I'm not Mother Teresa to save every alcoholic. I hate weaklings, and I don't consider such men real men." A few days after that conversation, Uncle Andrew's belongings disappeared from the house. For the first time, Clarice cried as if a tragedy had befallen her or someone close to her. She sought help from her grandmother, but Gloria shook her head and said, "My dear girl, I would love to help you, but Andrew is not a local. I don't even know where he came from in our town or where he's gone now. Maybe Judy knows. You should ask her." Gloria tried to comfort her distraught granddaughter, but she also thought, he must really be a good person if Clarice is so upset about him. This older woman contemplated the heavy fate she had been given. In her youth, she had suffered with a despotic husband, then raised 2 children on her own. Now, her daughter's behavior was causing a commotion in the neighborhood. "She's just like her father, and there's nothing I can do to change my destiny." Unexpectedly, Clarice was deeply affected by Andrew's departure. Trying to gather any information about this man, she followed her grandmother's advice and went to see Judy. But her mother's friend was only surprised. "Why do you need a stranger? Women don't love weaklings. Your mother said she never heard Andrew say no even once. He always agreed with her." Clarice was amazed. "So, he's not a confrontational person. Is that bad?" Her aunt thought for a while. "You see, any woman seeks a man who will make her feel safe, like a rock she can rely on. I don't dispute that Andrew deserves respect, but he's used to giving in. Besides, he has a serious vice. But if he had a real family, he would definitely quit drinking." "He told me that," Clarice insisted. "It's all true, but your mother is not the kind of person who's ready to make sacrifices. Carrie is used to taking without giving in return. I'll try to get Andrew's address from my husband." Judy's husband worked at a bus depot where Carrie had temporarily arranged a job for her chosen one. But, being a typical aunt, she made the promise and immediately forgot about it. Carrie wasn't used to being alone. It didn't take a year before she found a replacement for Andrew. Oliver arrived at their house just in time for Christmas. Clarice was decorating the Christmas tree when her mother returned from work with a young man by her side. "Darling, meet Oliver. We work together now." The 16-year-old girl politely greeted the guest and immediately directed a questioning glance at her mother. "You guessed it, my dear. Oliver will now be living with us." They spent Christmas evening in their new arrangement. Judy even came to visit them with her husband. After all the champagne was consumed and the salads were eaten, the women retired to the kitchen. On her way, her mother told her, "Your Aunt Judy and I will gossip a bit, and you can quietly clear the dishes. I don't want to leave them for tomorrow." Oliver was behaving casually. He settled down on the couch with the TV remote and paid no attention to his stepdaughter. Aunt Judy's husband was dozing nearby. Clarice was in no hurry, clearing the table and occasionally glancing in the direction of her mother's new husband. When the girl approached the kitchen with the last batch of dirty dishes, she overheard Judy loudly scolding her mother. "Carrie, have you gone crazy? Completely lost touch with reality? How old is your Oliver?" 26. "And so what? The problem is that this guy is definitely not for you. He would be more suitable as a husband for your daughter. You're about to turn 40, and you just won't settle down," her mother weakly replied. "Judy, stop trying to teach me. You're doing well with your George. He's a decent family manual. Finally, I found a decent man for myself, and you're humiliating me with your words. Why can't you all understand that I also want to grab my piece of happiness?" Gloria didn't approve of her daughter's choice. Even tears welled up in the grandmother's eyes. "What a disgrace. What will people say about you? He's almost the same age as your son," she exclaimed. Carrie spoke with anger. "I don't care what people think. This is my life, and I'm living it the way I want." First, Judy wasn't thrilled, and now you, Mom, are driving me crazy. Gloria was deeply hurt by her daughter's words and left without saying goodbye. Clarice tried her best to ignore her mother's new man, and Oliver responded in kind. However, Carrie was beaming with happiness. Evidently, love had blinded her to the point where she once asked her daughter, "Clarice, how would you feel if you had a little brother or sister?" The young girl was horrified. "Mom, are you serious? Why does that surprise you?" "Well, Grandma's right. There's definitely something wrong with your head. But, you know what? Do whatever you want. I'll be leaving soon anyway." Carrie glared at her daughter but chose to remain silent. Winter passed, and finally, spring arrived. On that May Day, Clarice was preparing for her very first date. Kevin Norfin, a high school senior, had invited her for a boat ride. Her mother was at work, and Oliver was lazing around at home. He noticed her fussing and asked, "Where are you going, Clarice?" The young girl responded sharply, "What's it to you?" The man leaped towards her. "Who do you think you're talking to? I talk to you the way you deserve." She wanted to go to her room, but Oliver blocked her way. There was a strange gleam in his eyes that terrified the girl. She said loudly, "Let me through. Maybe if you ask me nicely." I might take pity on you. Oliver's voice frightened Clarice. She had already forgotten about her date with Kevin and ran towards the exit. But Oliver caught up with her near the door, dragged her back, and pushed her onto the couch. Clarice realized there was no one to save her. At that very moment, her grandmother's voice echoed above her. "You scoundrel! Let her go." Something heavy crashed down on Oliver's back, and he released his victim. Gloria attacked him again and again with a chair in her hands, striking him with all her might on his back and other parts of his body. In horror, Oliver screamed, "Get out of here, old witch! I'll call the police now." The elderly woman lowered the chair and caught her breath. "I'm the one calling the police now. You'll be behind bars for a long time. And they really don't like people like you." "What are you talking about, you old fool? Your granddaughter had her eye on me for a long time. As soon as Carrie is out the door, her daughter parades in front of me half naked." Clarice was trembling, and her thinking was muddled. But she couldn't bear the filth that Oliver was pouring on her, and she launched a crystal vase at him. Fortunately, it missed his head. Gloria grabbed her granddaughter by the arms. "No, my dear. Don't dirty your hands with this scoundrel. God will surely punish him. Get ready. We're going to my place. I had a feeling I needed to come over here. I came, and I heard you screaming." While Clarice was gathering her belongings, her grandmother didn't take her eyes off Oliver. Before leaving, she told him, "You better disappear from this house for good. Don't think it's all over smoothly for you. We're going to the hospital to document the injuries, and then to the police." The man yelled, "I didn't do anything with her. I'm telling you, she threw herself at me." Gloria slapped him as hard as she could. "One more bad word about my granddaughter, and I won't be responsible for what I do. I'm old, and I have nothing to lose." This warning had an effect, and Oliver hastily left. The nerve shock had unpleasant consequences. By nightfall, Clarice started experiencing tremors and her bruised areas hurt badly. Gloria hovered around her granddaughter, saying, "Hang in there, my dear. I'll make a compress for you, and you'll feel better right away." The elderly woman waited for her daughter to arrive, but Carrie only visited them the next day. Instead of expressing sympathy, she scolded her daughter. "When will you stop causing trouble for me at every step? Why did you make this circus happen? You accused Oliver of who knows what. And you, Mom, went along with this young adventure. How could you do something like this?" Gloria replied sharply, "If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I might have had doubts. What did you see? Both of you have gotten on my nerves. You interfere and ruin everything. I find a decent man, and these two crazies meddle in and mess everything up." Carrie was about to cry, but unexpectedly, her mother grabbed a mop and drove her daughter to the door. "Have we ruined your life? You vile woman, get out of here." My daughter replaced her own child with her lover. Clarice saw her mother walk to the door and then fall down because she didn't notice the threshold. However, she felt no sympathy for her. On the contrary, she rejoiced in her heart that her mother stumbled and fell. This day marked a turning point for the girl when hatred overcame love. During her last year of school, Clarice lived with her grandmother. They couldn't hide that glaring incident, and soon even the teachers knew that the man from the post office attacked the stepdaughter. Fearing the consequences, Oliver quickly left town. Carrie's own reputation suffered significantly, and she was demoted in her position, now managing the sorting department. Of course, the victim herself suffered the most. Now, everyone at school avoided Clarice, and nightmares haunted her for a long time. She eagerly awaited the end of her school days, skipping the graduation ceremony, and receiving her diploma separately from the other graduates. Gloria comforted her granddaughter daily. "Time heals even more severe wounds. Trust me, you'll forget all of this." Clarice wanted to believe her grandmother's words. "Grandma, I need to leave this place. Otherwise, I'll never forget. Of course, go study in a big city. I'm still alive and healthy, and I'll help you as much as I can. If you want, you can stay with Uncle Jack. Grandma, I've decided to study to become a hairdresser, and they provide dormitories for out-of-towners. Well, that's good, but still, take Uncle Jack's address with you. He'll never refuse to help you." Gloria accompanied her granddaughter alone, often looking around as if searching for someone. Clarice guessed that her grandmother was waiting for her mother's appearance. "Grandma, I don't have a mother anymore." The elderly woman was taken aback. "My dear, you can't just disown your mother. You have to learn to forgive. Can you forgive something like that?" Clarice spoke quietly, her eyes filled with so much pain that Gloria didn't say anything else but thought. "Yes, wounds like these last a lifetime." The driver urged passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please hurry. I have a schedule to keep." Clarice stood on the bus step, and with a tearful voice, her grandmother asked, "Sweetie, don't forget about me. Visit from time to time." The girl jumped off the bus and embraced the woman tightly. "I will never forget you. Once I settle down, I'll take you with me." Clarice felt her blouse get wet. "But please don't cry, Granny. I'll call and write to you." The elderly woman bustled. "Clarice, I almost forgot. Take this. It's the address of Alex, your father. He used to write to me a lot, asking about you." An annoyed shout came from the driver. "How much can my patience endure? I'm closing the doors. You can stay behind." Gloria practically pushed her granddaughter into the bus. "Go, my dear, or he'll really leave you here. That driver is like a beast." The bus slowly moved off, quickly gaining speed and soon disappearing around the corner. But Gloria stood there for a long time, staring into the distance. Her heart was breaking into pieces, but she couldn't change anything now. After her last class, Clarice hurried towards the exit but collided with the class representative in the doorway. Lindsay Sterling considered it her duty to be aware of all the college's events. Her list of top priorities also included active involvement in the personal lives of all her classmates. Lindsay clutched Clarice's windbreaker sleeve and gave her a stern look. "Clarice, hold on. I've been looking for you." Clarice, emulating her friend, widened her eyes. Sterling scolded her. "Listen, I'm completely serious, and you're clowning around here. In short, you're urgently needed in the department." "Why? How would I know? I was asked to find you, and I've fulfilled my task. Go straight to the director's office." Clarice headed in the indicated direction, running through all possible reasons for her summons in her mind. But none of her speculations seemed to hold up. As soon as she opened the director's office door, Catherine greeted her with joy. "Clarice, I'm glad you came. I wanted to inform you this morning, but I got busy, and it slipped my mind." The girl realized this was just the beginning and patiently waited for more. After a meaningful pause, the director continued in a more casual tone. "I must inform you, student Clarice, that the jury has recognized your collection of men's hair kits as the best." Overjoyed, Clarice jumped up. "Well, so does that mean I won?" "Yes, you've added a few points to our college's list of achievements. I'm pleased that such talents are studying within our walls. But that's not all the good news." Catherine winked at Clarice for some reason and continued in a low voice. "Your work hasn't just been appreciated. It's been proposed for inclusion in the professional skills competition. The event is taking place in 2 weeks, so you have very little time to prepare." The joy quickly faded, and Clarice looked down. "Catherine, why are you upsetting me? The most renowned stylists will be there. Who am I compared to them? Can I compete with all professionals? And who would even let me participate in such a prestigious competition?" The director listened to Clarice, her face beaming. "My dear girl, it's not about winning but participating. In any case, you'll receive a certificate, which is a substantial asset for a successful start in your career. In short, right now, you're going to the beauty boutique salon and ask for Teddy Dunn. He's the best men's hair stylist. I've already made arrangements with him. He'll give you some training over these 2 weeks." Clarice tried to process the information she had received, and the director gave her a mock displeased look. "Richards, are you still here?" Go quickly to the salon, or I might change my mind. And yes, you can skip your classes for these 2 weeks. Perhaps it was the most delightful news. Clarice ran down the city's main street, feeling as if invisible wings were unfolding behind her. She wanted to sing and shout with joy, and she barely held herself back, her lips whispering soundlessly, "Clarice, you're the best. It's hard to believe this is all happening to me. It's just like a dream." Since the young woman left her small hometown where she was born and raised, almost 3 years had passed. During this time, Lady Luck never left her side. The only blight on the otherwise sunny horizon was the unpleasant encounter with her biological father. Upon arriving, she headed straight to college to submit her documents. However, the admissions office informed her that the dormitory assignments would only be given out after the start of the academic year. She felt a sense of despair because she didn't have the funds to stay in a hotel. "I'll have to ask Uncle Jack for shelter." Clarice had already envisioned her uncle's wife's disapproving face when she remembered the second address. She took an envelope from her bag, which her grandmother had given her before she boarded the bus. "All right, let's try to visit my father. Maybe he won't deny his daughter a small favor." Alex was overcome with excitement when he opened the door to an unexpected visitor. Perhaps due to his astonishment, he held the girl in the corridor for a good 10 minutes. During their conversation, Alex kept glancing at the doors, as if he were afraid someone would overhear. He spoke tersely, and his voice lacked expression. "Clarice, you could have given me a heads up. I wasn't expecting any guests. Besides, we were about to go on a family vacation." Clarice had no desire to explain anything. She merely expressed her disappointment. "Yeah, it's tough when neither your mother or your father wants you. Thanks for the warm welcome, Dad." Tears ran down her cheeks in 2 thin streams, but Clarice didn't want her father to see her crying. She grabbed her bags and rushed down the stairs. She heard her father following her, calling out, "Clarice, wait, you didn't give me a chance to explain." "Hold on." On the second floor, Alex caught up to his daughter and wrested the bags from her hands. "Are you always this irrational?" the girl yelled. "I'm irrational. I thought you'd at least pretend to be glad to see me for politeness' sake. But you didn't even invite me into the apartment." A female voice from the first floor reached them. "Alex, who are you arguing with?" Clarice froze, and the man explained in a whisper as they climbed the stairs. "It's my wife, Tiana. She's about to give me a hard time." Tiana, a good-looking woman who seemed to be in her mid-30s, reached the second floor and curiously examined Clarice. Alex cleared his throat to make it easier to explain, but Tiana gestured for him to wait. "Wait, Alex, I can figure this one out myself. The girl has your eyes, and that little quirk at the corner of her mouth is also quite familiar. Clarice, is she your daughter?" The guest was taken aback by the perceptive nature of her father's wife, and he whispered as they ascended the stairs, "Tiana is a psychologist. They often invite her to the criminal investigation department to create psychological profiles of criminals." The woman reached the top floor first. "Alex, you better confess right away what's going on here. And why are you keeping the guest in the stairwell?" she said. The man gathered his thoughts. "Tiana, please don't be angry, but there's a bit of a mess in our apartment." The woman gave her husband an annoyed look. "Has Monty been up to mischief?" "I knew it." She flung the door open, and something white and fluffy leaped at her from the apartment. With a scream, Clarice rushed back to the staircase. "Oh my goodness." But her father managed to restrain her. "Don't be afraid. Monty is still a small and very friendly dog. He's so huge, and I'm scared. It's not surprising. You've had this fear since childhood. When you were very little, you were frightened by an unfriendly dog, and ever since, you've been afraid of barking animals. That's why I kept you in the corridor for so long. I was afraid Monty would frighten you with his affection." Soon, the owner of the purebred dog appeared. Clarice's stepbrother was 14, an age where teenagers can be quite unpredictable. Chris gave the newly discovered sister an unfriendly look, but didn't say anything. He also declined dinner. It was uncomfortable for Clarice to realize that her presence had disrupted her father's family. However, Tiana calmly said, "Don't mind him. Chris is about the same age as our Monty. He'll come around, and everything will be fine." Tiana acted as if Clarice had always lived in their home. She always spoke calmly. During the few days the girls stayed in their apartment, her father's wife never raised her voice. She even handled Monty's antics with a smile. "You've misbehaved again, you rascal. What are we going to do with you?" Perhaps it was this attitude that endeared the dog to his owner, as he constantly stayed close to her, hoping for treats. The friendly dog also showed interest in the guest, but Clarice wasn't making any attempts to connect. Therefore, after 3 days of unsuccessful experiments, Alex irritably remarked, "I'll have to ask the neighbors. I thought, Clarice, that during our vacation, you would take care of our pet. You could water the plants as well." Chris chimed in. "She's just a scaredy cat. Runs away from Monty, but he adores her with all his heart and soul." The girl wanted nothing more than to put this conceited young man in his place. "You're quite the hero, aren't you? And you don't need to make up stories about me. I'm not afraid of Monty at all, right, Monty?" Monty barked happily, and it was clear that he liked Clarice's reassurance. The snow-white dog understood that his moment had come. At first, he rubbed against the girl's legs, then grew bolder, placing his front paws on Clarice's shoulders. To make the new acquaintance feel special, Monty gave her face a lick with his rough tongue. Clarice was taken aback at first, but she was pleasantly surprised that her initial contact with this adorable creature went smoothly and left her with only positive emotions. She noticed that her father, just like his wife, was watching this scene with concern. "It's all fine. Not scary at all," she assured them. Tiana stroked the pet's neck and remarked with pleasure, "Dealing with fears is the way to go." Clarice spent nearly a month in her father's apartment. She quickly adapted to her new life, and even the restless Monty seemed like an old friend. In early September, college classes began, and she submitted her request to the secretary again, asking for a place in the dormitory. Her request was approved, and she eagerly awaited her father's family's return from vacation. However, Alex was disappointed when he found out about Clarice's decision to move into the dorm. "Clarice, live with us. The apartment is spacious, and Monty has already gotten used to you." Tiana supported her husband. "Your dad is right. You should stay." Clarice was ready to agree, but she caught a hostile look from Chris and realized that her stepbrother didn't want to share his parents' love with her. To decline, she came up with a convenient excuse. "You know, all the girls stay in the dorm together. It's beneficial because we can review the material together after lectures, and finding clients will be easier." The Richards couple agreed. However, Clarice only lived in the dorm for 6 months, and then her father rented a budget-friendly apartment for her. "I've missed out on so much precious time with you, my daughter. Let me compensate for it a bit now." Overall, her father had done a lot for Clarice during her years of study, and his wife never voiced any objections. Perhaps there had been disagreements between them on this matter, but Tiana never displayed any displeasure. And one day, Clarice found herself thinking that her father's second wife was much kinder and more supportive than her mother. Throughout this time, Carrie visited her daughter only once, even though the city was just a 3-hour bus ride away. Instead of being happy that her ex-husband was helping their daughter, she said with disapproval, "So, you're accepting gifts from him?" The daughter pleaded, "Mom, please don't be angry. Dad is helping me, and his wife has never been unkind to me. So, the mother is the bad one, I see. This is how you repay me. What should I be grateful to you for? For bringing unfamiliar men into our home. One of your lovers almost did something unforgivable. If it weren't for Grandma." The lingering resentment struck Clarice's heart with the same intensity, and she burst into tears. However, Carrie didn't rush to comfort her. She had no intention of apologizing to her daughter. "It seems we won't be able to have a conversation. I'll head back," Carrie said. Clarice wanted to see her mother off, but she yelled at her, "Go to your daddy. Forget about me. I can manage without you." Consumed by hatred and anger, Carrie hadn't told her daughter about her serious illness. During a routine medical examination, doctors had discovered a liver condition in her. Clarice learned about her mother's grim diagnosis from her grandmother, who visited her almost every month. The doctors said that Carrie has either hepatitis or something related to a blow. "Your mother doesn't drink, but her liver is deteriorating as if she were an alcoholic." After Clarice learned about her mother's illness, she tried to mend the relationship. But Carrie was embittered against the world, especially her daughter. She met Clarice with reproaches. "It's because of you that I got sick. You've cursed your own mother. Leave." The woman didn't even let her daughter into the house and slammed the door in her face. After this incident, Clarice gave up any attempts to reconnect with her mother. She only maintained contact with her grandmother. Clarice admired his perfect profile, while he pretended to be asleep. To catch her beloved off guard, she gently ran her pinky over his face. This action didn't yield the desired result, so she had to use a feather. Clarice brushed it under Teddy's nose a few times, and he sneezed once, followed by a cascade of loud sneezes. "You little prankster, I'll get you back for that." Teddy rolled onto his side and started tickling Clarice. She squealed, trying to escape his grasp. The romantic couple's amusement was interrupted by the ringing of Teddy's mobile phone. He immediately grabbed the gadget and put his finger to his lips, signaling his partner to keep quiet. He casually answered the call. "How many times have I asked you not to bother me with trivialities? So what if he's being fussy? All kids are like that at his age. Zoe, I'll come over when I'm free. I have a client in the chair right now. I'll call you back later." While Teddy was on the phone, Clarice watched his expression closely. The joy disappeared instantly because she felt the invisible presence of Teddy's wife. "Teddy, it feels like your Zoe is keeping an eye on you. I've noticed she always calls at the most inconvenient times." "Yes, there's that. You see, it's pointless to explain anything to my wife. She's always on her own wavelength. And with Michael in the picture, she's completely lost it. I'm getting jittery from her calls. I want to send her away, but..." Clarice finished her sentence, saying, "You can't because your Zoe's daddy is very influential. As soon as he bats an eye, you'll be in trouble. Am I right?" Teddy gently caressed her back and replied, "Darling, you always speak the truth. But don't judge me. I never thought marriage would bring me so many problems. It's all because you chose a partner based on calculation, not love. If you had married me instead of Zoe," Clarice said. Teddy quickly got out from under the covers. "Clarice, there's no point in dreaming of the impossible. We've discussed this before. I won't hide that I have the most positive feelings for you, but two struggling people can't unite. It's only in physics that combining two negatives results in a positive. Life doesn't work that way," Clarice observed as her lover hurriedly got dressed. Resentment towards him had built up in her heart for a long time, and she thought, "Just wait, Teddy. One day I'll get back at you, and you'll be sorry." Of course, she never expressed such thoughts out loud, even though she yearned to teach her lover a lesson. Teddy tidied himself up and asked in a casual tone, "Aren't you seeing me off?" Clarice replied in the same tone, "No, I don't see the need for that." Teddy concluded, "So, you're upset." "Teddy, Zoe is waiting for you," Clarice replied with a mocking tone. Teddy muttered some expletives and, within a few seconds, the front door slammed shut. "He didn't even kiss me. No, I really need to do something about this situation, and the sooner I free myself from this dependency, the better for both of us. In this affair, Teddy is the weak link, and he'll drag me down with him someday." Clarice spoke her mind aloud. However, she remained completely calm, although the mere thought of parting from Teddy used to trigger panic. Her secret affair with another woman's husband was weighing increasingly on Clarice. She realized that eventually, she would have to end the relationship with this man. But a sense of gratitude held her back from taking the decisive step because Teddy had done so much for her. Meeting Teddy had turned everything upside down in the mind of the naive girl. This handsome, well-dressed guy resembled a Hollywood movie star. When, on the orders of the college director, Clarice went to the salon for a consultation, she had no idea that her future mentor would have such a striking appearance. When she arrived at the reception desk, the girl there languidly remarked, "This is a men's salon. You've probably got the wrong address." Clarice replied confidently, "I'm aware. I need Master Dan. I'm here to see him." The girl, albeit more loudly, but just as indifferently, said, "Teddy Dan, someone's urgently asking for you." An irritated voice from the salon responded, "Lucy, who's asking for me?" "Some girl." There was no response, but the master himself appeared. He looked at Clarice with interest, and she couldn't speak a word because her mouth had gone completely dry. At that moment, she felt like a spark had ignited between them. The young man gave her a sweet smile and asked, "How can I help you?" She stammered, "I'm from the college. Catherine called you." The young man, still smiling, said, "Yes, she asked me to prepare you." "Well then, colleague, come in. Let's not waste any time and get started with the lessons." Although the great Salvador Dali claimed that a person is not capable of achieving perfection, we'll try to do just that. Over the course of 2 weeks of training, they grew very close. Their relationship could have been called friendship if it weren't for that spark that had ignited in the first moments of their meeting. The competition went quite well for the debutante, as the jury awarded her a special prize for Discovery of the Year. Of course, she hadn't expected such a result and was overwhelmed with various emotions. Gratitude to her mentor was at the forefront of those emotions. She hesitantly offered the envelope with the award to the master, saying, "If it weren't for you, Teddy, I wouldn't have achieved anything. It's more your merit than mine. Please take it." Clarice wanted to give the cash prize to the man, but he categorically refused, saying, "No, dear Clarice, I won't take the money, but I won't turn down a light dinner in your company." The girl was delighted and said, "Exactly. Why didn't I think of that? I'll go to the store now, and then we can go to my place. Let's celebrate this grand event together." Teddy asked cautiously, "How will your parents react to the evening guest?" Clarice laughed. "I live alone. My dad rented me a 1-bedroom apartment when I started college." "Well, you have quite an affluent father." "No, he's not very wealthy. He has a small auto repair shop. He and my mom divorced when I was only 3, and now he has another family and a wonderful dog named Monty." "That's a strange name for a dog." "Well, I'm generally indifferent to all animals." They went to the supermarket together, and Teddy insisted on paying for the groceries. Clarice objected, saying, "It's not fair, Teddy, it's my success, so I should pay for the groceries." Teddy responded, "You yourself said your success is my merit. And stop using you when talking to me. Aren't we friends?" "Friends? If you're so eager to spend money, you can buy a cake. It would be very symbolic. Although I don't eat sweets, I'm willing to try a piece of that culinary masterpiece just for you." The man pointed at a tiny chocolate glazed cake. However, they didn't get to taste it because after 2 glasses of champagne, Clarice felt her inhibition slipping away. Teddy was cautious and very tender, and after their first kiss, Clarice lost her head. It was an unforgettable night, and Clarice wanted it to be repeated again and again. Teddy felt the same way and practically moved into his young lover's apartment. Clarice was already dreaming of a long and happy life together with her beloved. But one day, a storm broke out on a clear day. After her triumphant debut in the professional mastery competition, Clarice was happily hired by Beauty Boutique. Although she had dreamed of becoming a female master, she accepted this option. The reason for her agreement was obvious: the opportunity to be close to Teddy. To avoid arousing suspicions among her colleagues, the lovers decided to work different shifts. They would meet in Clarice's apartment in the evening and revel in each other's company. On that evening, Teddy arrived later than usual and remained in the hallway. Clarice immediately noticed that he was not in a good mood. "Did something happen? Are you in trouble?" she asked. For a while, the man remained silent. Then he said with difficulty, "Clarice, we need to talk." She smiled and sat down next to him. She wanted to hug her beloved, but he moved away from her, saying, "Not now, kitten. And you probably won't want to hug and kiss me after I tell you what I have to say. Only if you've decided to marry someone else," she responded. He let out a heavy sigh, as if he had been carrying heavy boulders until then. "You hit the nail on the head. I'm indeed going to become a family man soon. But believe me, it's a forced marriage. Zoe, my fiancée, is the daughter of a very influential person. Her father promised to help me in business since I've long dreamed of buying beauty boutique." But Clarice struggled to contain her emotions. "Teddy, you don't have to continue. I understand everything. Pack your things and get out of here." He tried to calm her down. "Clarice, don't overreact. My marriage doesn't mean anything. It's just a formality. You and I can continue seeing each other and spend wonderful time in your cozy apartment, and you've already planned everything. Did you even ask me if I want to live like that?" "No, Teddy, this option doesn't work for me." Clarice quickly packed her lover's belongings in a large sports bag. "I wish you a happy married life." Teddy had to leave the apartment. The next day, Clarice announced her departure from the salon. The owner of Beauty Boutique tried to dissuade her from this decision, but Clarice insisted on leaving. On the same day, she found a new job at a women's beauty salon, leaving only one task: to erase her lover from her life. But it took her a long time to do that. Teddy called for an entire week, but she didn't answer. Then the calls stopped, and Clarice found a new admirer. Richard was one of the best representatives of the old guard. He headed a university and, at the age of 65, showed no signs of retiring. People like Professor Mile valued their routines the most. Richard visited Beauty Boutique and once found himself in Clarice Richard's chair. The old Lothario highly appreciated Clarice's work and began to occasionally show her various signs of attention. Most often, Richard gifted her with luxurious bouquets and chocolates. Only once did he invite her to have dinner with him at a restaurant. Clarice accepted, but on the next day, she regretted it because Teddy learned about her new suitor. He confronted Clarice with reproaches and even began to threaten the professor. "Clarice, tell that old man that if I see him near you again, he'll regret it. At his age, it's time to sit in a rocking chair and treat his back pain," Teddy said. Clarice didn't like this pressure and decided to provoke her lover. "Teddy, I'm not your property. Besides, age isn't an obstacle for a man, and Richard is still a great guy." Teddy widened his eyes. "Have you already slept with him? Confess." For the first time, Clarice saw Teddy in such a state. It frightened her for a moment, and she tried to defuse the conflict. Men like you only have one thing on their minds. But people can simply date because they find each other interesting. The professor has traveled a lot. He tells fascinating stories, and, in general, he's not the kind of man who's used to changing women. He has a wonderful wife and 2 grown children, with a son even 10 years older than me. So your jealousy isn't founded." Teddy calmed down a bit and no longer took the professor's courtship of his girlfriend so painfully. However, when he announced his decision to marry Zoe, Clarice immediately remembered Richard Mile. She was the one who called her regular client and arranged a meeting in a cafe near her new workplace. To prevent Richard from suspecting that he was just a pawn in the hands of a young manipulator seeking revenge, Clarice spent half an hour talking about her desire to pursue higher education. The professor was instantly captivated by the idea. "Clarice, that's the right decision, and I'm ready to help you on your path to knowledge." Miles spoke inspiringly, and the young woman eagerly nodded in agreement. "Yes, Richard, I'm really counting on your support. I'm practically an orphan. I don't have a father, and my mother is fatally ill," Clarice lied passionately while Professor Mile gently caressed her hand. "My poor girl, you've been through so much. You know, I'm ready to personally tutor you on weekends. It's autumn now, and no one lives in our countryside house," the professor said affectionately. Clarice didn't make him beg for too long. It should be noted that Richard, despite his rather advanced age, was very attractive as a man. He always wore fresh shirts, brand-name shoes, and expensive suits. Of course, Clarice was most enticed by the expensive gifts. The professor smoothly transitioned from bouquets to jewelry. For the first time, the thought crossed Clarice's mind. He might be old, but look at the gifts he gives. Teddy, on the other hand, presented me with one warm bouquet of roses and cheap perfume in 2 years. He keeps complaining about not having enough money for clothes. The individual lessons at the professor's countryside house started with romantic candle-lit dinners and smoothly transitioned to the bedroom, where Clarice was pleasantly surprised once again by the professor's virility. Whispers in the shower confirmed her thoughts. Yes, Richard can outperform any young man, even Teddy, with ease. The countryside weekends continued throughout the autumn. The professor lavished his young lover with gifts and, one day, revealed a secret. "Clarice, you've breathed new life into me, and I want to give you another gift." He pulled a velvet case from his breast pocket, and Clarice thought it was another piece of jewelry. But when he pressed an invisible button, the lid opened, revealing a set of keys. She exclaimed in surprise, "Richard, what is this?" The man was pleased to have amazed his young mistress. "These are keys to your very own apartment. My relatives know nothing about this property, which I inherited from my uncle a long time ago. I must admit that for some time, this apartment served as a place for secret meetings." The professor laughed at his successful joke and added, "I think, after a little renovation, you can move to this new place where I'll visit you from time to time." Clarice looked at this gray-haired man and thought, he looks decent, but in reality, he's quite the ladies' man. She cautiously took the box with the keys and held it to her chest, saying, "Thank you, but honestly, I don't deserve such an expensive gift." "There will be plenty of time for you to make me happy," Richard responded. Richard had brought the documents for the apartment along with the keys. "My dear, everything is officially in your name. No one can object," he assured her. However, Clarice didn't have the chance to move into the new apartment before Teddy showed up once more. The young man looked far from his best and cursed his luck. "Clarice, you can't imagine. It's only been 6 months, but these months feel like an eternity. I'm not even sure how much longer I can take it. Sometimes this longing gets so overwhelming that I feel like jumping off a bridge into the river. Please, don't push me away." Clarice listened in silence to her former lover's confession, feeling the ember in her heart reignite. She was unsure of what to do. She couldn't bring herself to tell Teddy that someone else had taken his place. Yet, seeing both men simultaneously wasn't part of her plan. Putting stereotypes aside, Clarice decided to keep everything as it was, especially since she could no longer fully rely on Teddy. On weekends, she would go with the professor to his countryside house, telling Teddy that she was visiting her grandmother. Meetings with her former lover took place in a rented apartment for several months because the professor's hired workers were renovating her new apartment, and Richard frequently visited it. Clarice enjoyed this double life. She found a unique charm in it. She wanted her love affair to continue for as long as possible, but Teddy slipped away for the second time, and she decided that she had had enough. Let him entertain his wife, but I will definitely plan an act of revenge for his deceit. Clarice called her father and said she no longer needed the rented apartment. Alex didn't ask too many questions, and Clarice even thought he was relieved. "All right, dear, I'll inform the landlord right away. Let me know when you can pick up the keys." The night before, Clarice moved all her furniture and belongings to her new apartment. She was most afraid that Teddy would show up at that moment, so she decided to wait with her father by the building. Alex arrived with Chris, her stepbrother, who was behind the wheel, waving to her. Clarice waved back, but deep down, she felt a painful jab, no matter how you look at it. "I don't fit into my father's family. I'm like a foreign element. Alex took the keys and, as a parting wish, he said, "Good luck, dear. If you ever need money or any help, just call. After all, we're still family." She had promised to call regularly, but when the car with her relatives drove away, she thought, "No, Dad, we're very much strangers, despite sharing the same genes. Still, I'm grateful for everything you've done for me." The day after moving to her new apartment, Teddy called and began to complain once again. "Clarice, can I come to see you?" "No, Teddy, it's time for us to stop seeing each other. You'll become a happy father soon, and I don't want to ruin your family. By the way, how's your salon?" There was silence on the other end for a while, and Clarice even thought there might be a problem with the connection. But then Teddy finally realized what Clarice was asking about. "Sorry, I didn't catch on immediately to which salon you were referring. My father-in-law deceived me. He keeps making promises and says he doesn't have any spare money right now, claiming all his capital is tied up. But I know these are just excuses. I want to take out a loan from a bank, but the amount is quite large, and I'm not sure they'll approve it." Teddy talked at length about his father-in-law. Clarice got tired of listening to him and switched off her mobile phone. "That's it, my dear. Deal with your problems on your own. You wanted to marry a wealthy bride, go ahead and get married." Clarice had many unpleasant words to say about her former lover, and in her mind, a plan for exquisite revenge was nearly ripe. During their next meeting with the professor, Clarice initiated a conversation about her future. "Richard, life is so wonderful, and here I am languishing in a beauty salon." The man looked at her with interest, saying, "Oh, and what's bothering my princess?" Clarice pouted capriciously, saying, "Can't you see? I'm tired of working for someone else. I want to work for myself. What do you lack?" Clarice began to purr like a cat. "Why ask such silly questions? You already know the answer." Mile paused for a moment and then asked very professionally, "How much do you need to make your dream a reality?" Desperately, Clarice waved her hands and said, No, honey, you misunderstood me. I just want to borrow some money for a short period. Let's say I want to buy a beauty boutique for men. Business is doing very poorly there, and the owner is planning to move abroad. What's the asking price?" Richard inquired. Clarice mentioned the sum. Richard raised his eyebrows in surprise, then smiled. "Women have a way of getting what they want from us. Get in touch with the salon owner tomorrow, and I'll talk to her myself. I'm quite knowledgeable in these matters, but in my opinion, this lady has set an unreasonably high price. I think I'll manage to bring her down to earth. My lawyer will then handle everything properly. These law firms have a habit of squeezing money out of people." Clarice gazed at her beloved with admiration and whispered, "Richard, you're so kind. I'll give you every penny. Let me write you a receipt." The man frowned and said, "No need for any receipts. You can return it when you can." A week later, all the documents for the salon were in Clarice's hands. The new owner now had to decide which of the old staff to keep and who to let go. At the top of the list for potential dismissal was Teddy Dan. Before leaving the salon where he had worked for more than a decade, Teddy decided to have a conversation with his former lover. As tradition dictates, he knocked and entered the office without waiting for an invitation. "Clarice, why are you doing this to me? What have I done wrong to you? I helped you become successful, and you've repaid me with ingratitude. I didn't expect this from you, but God sees everything, and your boomerang is already in the air." The woman listened to him and then stated seriously, "Teddy, I've heard your speech, but you didn't need to get so worked up. And regarding gratitude, Teddy, you've used me for so many years, not hesitating to pass off my ideas as your own. So it's unclear who should be thanking whom." The man gave a resentful look to the new salon owner and left, hanging his head low. Clarice thought that another page of her life's book had been read to the end. Now she had to turn the page and leave unpleasant moments in the past. After her final parting with Teddy, Clarice realized it was time to build her own happiness and not warm herself by someone else's fire. On the second day after the funeral, Clarice decided to do a little cleaning in her childhood home. But right in the midst of the process, the relentless Judy showed up and started yelling as soon as she opened the door. "What are you doing? Stop it immediately. It's not appropriate to clean up. They just removed the deceased yesterday." Clarice had already grown tired of this woman's instructions. "And Judy, why are you yelling like that? Are you here for a reason or just to chat? It's kind of business, and I'm here to talk about selling the house." Clarice impatiently interrupted. "It seems like we've already talked about this. I'm not planning to sell anything. The house is nice. My father built it. And why didn't he come to the funeral? What kind of silly questions are these? He didn't want to come, and he didn't. He has another family, and nobody forced him." Clarice tried to speak calmly, but irritation was rising inside her, so she raised her voice as she continued. "Judy, I've been trying to figure out for the past 2 days why you're so interested. Why are you poking your nose into someone else's house with your advice? I'm not offering you any advice. I just want some time alone to think. But you're here early in the morning." Judy stormed out the door. Outside, she stood in the middle of the yard and shouted, "She's pretending to be something she's not. It's still unclear how you earned a salon and a separate apartment. She's gone mad, just like her mother." The young woman barely restrained her desire to rush out onto the street and give that audacious aunt a piece of her mind. But she immediately pictured how absurd such a scene would look. Throughout the day, Clarice tried to distract herself from her gloomy thoughts. But Judy's parting words, "She's gone mad, just like her mother," continued to nag at her like a flashing warning light. Clarice tried to console herself by recognizing the stark differences between her life and her late mother's way of living. The most significant distinction lay in the fact that she, Clarice, hadn't brought grief to anyone because she didn't have children yet. As thoughts of her own future children weighed on her, it became difficult for her to breathe. She whispered in a strangled voice, "No, Aunt Judy is right about something. I do risk repeating my mother's fate. It's time to put an end to this. I need to build my own family." Thoughts of a peaceful future warmed the young woman's heart on the way back home, to the point that she even forgot that her fridge was empty. The clock showed 11:15, and Clarice called out from her seat, "Dear driver, please stop at the store." The driver, with feigned seriousness, declared, "It's not allowed. We'll reach the bus station shortly, and you can go wherever you need from there. But by the time we get there and then come back, everything will already be closed. Sir, please." The driver grinned. "You've convinced me. Hop off." The bus jerked, and Clarice nearly fell out of its empty cabin. The store was just as empty as the bus. A late shopper was hurriedly tossing groceries into her basket, while a young brunette woman in her 30s was similarly occupied at the distant shelves. The cashier called out to the shoppers, "Ladies, please hurry. Otherwise, you won't be able to check out." The women simultaneously rushed to the single operational checkout and bumped into each other in their haste. The stranger began apologizing, and Clarice did the same. The cashier grumbled, "Do you have a cosmic communication session going on in here? I'm telling you, the store is closing." The stern cashier reminded Clarice of a strict nanny in a kindergarten. She would threaten the kids who disturbed others with the idea of recycling them as secondary raw materials, a threat that worked wonders. The children in her group were absolutely terrified of recycling centers for glass and other waste. Later, when the older kids participated in a cleanup event and were tasked with picking up some trash, one boy asked the teacher, "Have the bad kids already run out? Or do they not accept them anymore instead of bottles?" The teacher was speechless with astonishment. The resourceful nanny who came up with this original method to scare the children was initially considered for dismissal. But she was ultimately retained because she was a valuable employee. The memory of this childhood incident brightened Clarice's mood slightly, and she was eager to share her positive emotions with someone. Since the streets were deserted and the cashier practically chased her and the stranger out of the store, She decided to strike up a conversation with her fellow unfortunate companion. Clarice told the woman about the resourceful nanny, and the woman laughed for a long time, then thanked her, saying, "Thank you for making me laugh. My mood has been at rock bottom." Clarice was not accustomed to prying into people's souls and patiently waited for the stranger to add something to that message. Her intuition did not fail her. The woman looked at her hopefully and said, "My name is Hope, but I've long stopped believing in anything good." Clarice replied, "You know, sometimes it's more helpful to confide in a stranger than a friend. The only inconvenience is that it's cold outside. Please don't take this as audacious, but would you like to come to my place, have some tea, and chat?" Hope responded, "I'd be happy to accept your offer, especially since I don't feel like going back home right now. I had a big fight with my husband. Let him suffer for a bit. He only thinks about himself." Clarice opened up. "I'll let you in on a secret, Hope. Most men are like that, so your husband isn't an anomaly." The women spent the night in the kitchen, with Clarice boiling the kettle 5 times. From Hope's jumbled story, Clarice understood that she had made a significant mistake in choosing her life partner. "I always thought that people from the world of professional sports were kind and sociable in their everyday lives. But my husband displayed those qualities only at the beginning of our relationship. You know, on the second day after our wedding, he confessed that he married me for the sake of his career. My father, unfortunately, is no longer with us, but he was a university rector. To my misfortune, he saw a promising leader in my chosen one. Of course, this was about the distant future, but my husband was eager to expedite the process. In short, after our wedding, he began to scheme behind my father's back, and that's what eventually led my dad to his grave." Clarice finally asked, "Why do you put up with such a scoundrel? Divorce and return to your maiden name." Hope forced a smile and said, "I've already left my maiden name behind. My husband believed that I hadn't earned the honor of bearing the famous Abbott family name. He comes from a highly distinguished pedigree, and he's obsessed with that. After my father passed away, he made me sign over all my documents to him." Clarice was so surprised that she even started to stutter. "I may not be a legal professional, but I've never heard of anyone being first to sign something against their interests." Hope looked away and confessed, "My husband kept me locked up for almost a week, withholding water from me. It was terrible. To end the suffering, I signed all the papers his lawyer brought. Now I'm entirely under his control, and in case of a divorce, I'd lose everything. Actually, I have no rights in any case." Clarice exclaimed, "But this is impossible. You simply don't know my husband." Hope replied, "He used to be a professional boxer and even held the title of a champion. To be honest, I'm scared of him. I've developed neuroses or something like that because of it, but my husband claims I'm just faking it." Clarice was determined to help this unfortunate woman. She found Deanna's number in her contact list and said, "Hope, here's the number of an excellent psychologist. She's the second wife of my father, and she's a great specialist. She will definitely help you." Hope hesitated. "I'll try to remember it. But my husband regularly checks my mail and calls to avoid any trouble for myself." Only in the early morning did the guest hurry home. Clarice offered to see her off, saying, "I'm worried about you. If your husband starts getting violent, I'll feel guilty." Hope forced a smile through her strained face. "He resorts to more sophisticated methods with me, but he has never hit me. He goes jogging at 5 in the morning according to his plan. If I manage to show up at that time, he won't change his schedule because of me, and by then, he'll have cooled off." With a heavy heart, Clarice saw the new acquaintance off. For some reason, she thought that this woman would reappear in her life soon. However, a day passed, then a week, and Hope didn't call. Clarice gradually began to forget about that chance encounter in the store and the sleepless night that followed. Then the events of her own life swept the young woman into their tumultuous whirlwind. Less than a year after her mother's premature death, her grandmother Gloria passed away. Clarice had barely recovered from this loss when Professor Mile also passed away. Richard's death was a heavy blow to her. When this kind-hearted man was no longer there, Clarice realized that she genuinely loved him. A void had formed in her heart that couldn't be filled. Her only consolation was work. After all, the professor had thought of everything in advance, and his relatives never bothered Clarice. She not only had fond memories of her lover, but also his apartment and salon. To distract herself from her sorrowful thoughts, Clarice directed all her energy into developing her business. She analyzed the salon's performance over the past 2 years and concluded that the establishment's concept needed an urgent change. To achieve this goal, the salon owner hired experts in the field who recommended expanding the range of services for the target audience. When Clarice examined the list of suggestions, she was outraged. "Guys, this is a men's salon, and you've included hand massages, pedicures, and paraffin wraps. These will require significant costs, and I doubt these procedures will be in demand, which means they won't be profitable." John Flavin, a young manager, stated, "You're mistaken. We didn't come up with these ideas out of thin air. We first studied the demand. In general, Clarice, you have a mistaken view of modern men. A normal man, especially in the business world, will always pay attention to his appearance." The salon owner hesitated for a while, but eventually agreed with the manager's creative decision. Just 3 months into the new approach, she was forced to admit that Sean had made the right prediction. Profits were on the rise, and the client base had increased. Clarice decided to express her gratitude to her assistant and invited him to her office. When Flavin arrived and looked around for a place to sit, the owner solemnly said, "Flavin, I want to express my respect for you." The young man was utterly bewildered and looked around cautiously. It seemed funny, and Clarice laughed, saying, "Don't be afraid. I want to offer you the position of my deputy. How do you feel about that?" John broke into a broad smile and said, "If it's not a prank, then I'm all for it. I don't have the habit of joking in the workplace. So, do we have a deal?" Clarice asked. The young man eagerly responded, "Yes, of course. I didn't expect such a sudden turn of events. If things continue like this, I'll soon be able to start my own business. Thank you." The young man sprinted to the door, while the woman watched his unrestrained outburst of joy with a smile. Suddenly, she thought that she too would like to leap like that young man. After all, she was only 4 years older than Sean, yet she felt like an ancient old woman next to him. Once again, the thought came to her, "I need to change something urgently in my life, or I'll turn into a gray mouse." Drawing these conclusions, Clarice decided that constant interaction with a young and highly promising colleague would benefit not only her business, but also herself. Some time passed, and the salon owner realized she hadn't been mistaken about the young specialist. John exuded energy. Besides his primary responsibilities, he also attended to clients, as he held a massage therapist certification. Clarice was already pleased to see the end of her run of bad luck when a small black cloud appeared on an otherwise clear sky. To make matters worse, the cause of this trouble was her deputy, John Flavin. The incident revolved around a very capricious client who believed that the massage he received was of poor quality. The man created a scene right in the main hall, seemingly to attract the attention of other clients, which he successfully did. Some witnesses began recording the incident on their smartphones. The dissatisfied client shouted, "Your therapist knows nothing about massage. He nearly crippled me. I won't let this slide." At the moment Clarice stormed out of her office, threats were being hurled. The salon owner approached the man and calmly said, "Stop your tantrum, and if you threaten my employees, I'll call the police." Witnesses can confirm that you promised, for example, to hang the massage therapist from the nearest lamp post and then amputate his limbs without anesthesia. The woman's calm words had an effect on the aggressive client, and he immediately quieted down. Afterward, Clarice invited him and Sean Flavin to her office. "Let's go in and calmly sort this out. During the discussion, it turned out that the man had numerous injuries but hadn't bothered to inform the therapist. To conclusively settle the matter, the salon owner placed the service rules on the table in front of the troublemaker. He read the text carefully and then said, "I didn't realize your establishment had such a serious approach. I apologize for my behavior. Maybe I can be of use to you." The man handed his business card to Sean. "I currently head the sports medicine department and can assist with job placement." Flavin declined the offer. "Thank you, but I'm content with this job." The client bid his apologies, and Clarice and the masseur remained silent for a while. When the bewilderment from the client's interaction had receded, Sean thoughtfully said, "A person in such a position should at least have some understanding of medicine." Joseph Abbott, a painfully familiar name. The young man squinted his eyes intensely, but then exclaimed, "He's the former boxer. If I remember correctly, he was even a champion." It seemed that the incident had concluded. However, the next day, the former boxer appeared in the salon once more. The man headed straight to the director's office, much to Clarice's surprise. He first handed her a bouquet of burgundy roses, then proceeded to apologize extensively. The woman was eager to bid farewell to the intrusive client, but she tried to remain polite to avoid triggering a new scandal. After the tiresome speech, Mr. Abbott disappeared. However, he returned the following day. Flavin was the first to notice him and warned the salon owner, "It seems this boxer has set his sights on you. If it becomes difficult, call for help." The man was dressed handsomely, radiating endless energy. He confidently invited Clarice to dinner, saying, "For the past 2 days, I felt a moral discomfort due to the damage I've caused you. I want to do something pleasant for you personally, Clarice, and after much thought, I believe that a dinner at a fine restaurant is the best option." The woman started to contemplate how to politely decline, but Abbott preempted her by saying, "Refusal is not an option." Surprisingly, the evening went by in a pleasant atmosphere. Towards the end of the dinner, Joseph no longer appeared as unpleasant and intrusive as he did initially. Gradually, the meetings with this man became regular, and Clarice, almost without realizing it, began to regard him as a potential candidate for a husband. Moreover, Joseph assured her that he was nearly free. About his wife, the man mentioned only that she had weak health and couldn't even handle basic household tasks, let alone fulfill her marital duties. "You see, Clarice, I'm a healthy man, and I have natural needs. But my wife is constantly complaining about her poor health or simply disappears from home. So, what should I do in such a situation?" Although Clarice was not a prude, conversations on such a delicate topic made her blush. However, the new admirer grew more persistent with each passing day, saying, "Clarice, I dream of the day when we can become one. You know, I'm going through a very difficult period right now, and you can help me overcome these difficulties." "All right, Joseph, I will help you. But you have a wife," Clarice responded, deciding to stick to her promises. "We have already settled everything with her. She's agreed to a divorce, but we'll have to wait 2 months. Clarice, we're adults, and we don't necessarily have to stick to schedules. Tomorrow my wife is leaving for 2 days. She's visiting various charlatans for her treatment, wasting her money. In short, tomorrow we can spend a magical evening at my place. How do you feel about that?" "I agree, Joseph. If your wife is genuinely not going to be there," Clarice cautiously replied. Joseph seemed skeptical. "You don't believe me?" Offense tinged the man's voice, and Clarice reluctantly agreed to secret meetings at his apartment. During their acquaintance, Joseph told her a lot about himself. He went into great detail about his sports career and a severe injury that forced him to leave sports. He narrated his ill-fated marriage to a woman who had been his most ardent admirer. He didn't hide the story of his father-in-law, who plotted against him and didn't want his son-in-law to work at the same educational institution. But the entire story of Joseph Abbott's life revolved around the idea that at every turn, enemies conspired against him, rendering him the unhappiest person on the planet. Clarice had never encountered such fate-embittered individuals before and wasn't sure how to deal with Joseph. She still hoped to build a peaceful family life with this man. So she accepted the invitation to his apartment. Joseph's apartment left Clarice astonished. Essentially, it was a fusion of two adjacent flats, making it easy to get lost in the spacious residence. The guest was overwhelmed by the grandeur, and Joseph attempted to expedite the process. After just one glass of champagne, he proposed, "Clarice, I am at your complete disposal for this evening. And now, I believe it's time for a little tour." He embraced the woman and showered her with kisses. However, the front door slammed shut, and Joseph, in a fluster, rushed around. He said, "My wife is back. I'll quickly escort her out." Light footsteps echoed, and Hope entered the room. Clarice instantly recognized her nighttime visitor, but managed to maintain her composure. The hostess, too, only glanced at her for a moment and stared at a point on the ceiling. Hope said, "I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'm feeling very unwell, and I had to come back." Clarice promptly prepared to leave, saying, "Thank you, Joseph, for the pleasant evening." The man rushed after her. "Clarice, wait, I'll walk you out." "It's not necessary. It's not far from here," she replied. Clarice could see the way Hope looked at her. The sight of this woman genuinely stirred concern, rekindling her desire to help. She wasn't surprised when she encountered Hope near the entrance the next morning. The woman appeared pale, with dark circles under her eyes. "Clarice, I apologize for this early visit, but things got awkward yesterday. If I had known he was with you, I certainly wouldn't have come earlier," Hope said. "No need to apologize to me, Hope. I never expected Joseph to be your husband. He described his wife in such a way that she seemed nothing like you," Clarice replied. Hope looked at her with a pleading expression. "I'm sorry once again, but I really don't feel well. Something's been wrong with me in the past few weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if my husband were slipping something into my food," Clarice exclaimed. "Let's go up to my place. I have some ideas. You know, I've been thinking about you all night." Hope responded, "Oh, come on, Clarice. Why do you care? Everyone's so self-absorbed these days." "Maybe, but my grandmother always said we should help our neighbors. My mother had a completely different philosophy, but I prefer my grandmother's outlook," Clarice said. "Clarice, I don't know why, but I trust you completely. I guess I don't have many good options left, just bad ones." They took the elevator to Clarice's floor and continued their conversation in her apartment. "Hope, I suggest we teach your husband a lesson he'll remember for life," Clarice proposed in a nonchalant tone. "Of course, it depends on you. I'm in. Just tell me what to do," Hope replied. Clarice poured tea into cups and said, "It won't require anything special from you, or from me for that matter. We'll simply stage a little play. After that, Joseph will stay out of your life forever." "Is that even possible?" Hope asked. "It's possible, and it won't take much effort," Clarice reassured her. Clarice explained her plan to the distressed woman. As Hope listened, she became increasingly enthusiastic. When Clarice stopped talking, Hope looked at her with admiration. "Clarice, you're a genius. Why didn't I think of something like this before? When do we start implementing our plan?" Hope eagerly inquired. "Right after you undergo an examination. It's possible that your beloved husband genuinely used some chemistry to get rid of you. After you've done that, give me a call," Clarice instructed. At the entrance, Clarice handed her the keys. "Head straight to the country house. You'll find my place easily, and try not to interact with anyone. If anyone asks, just say you're a tenant." Joseph was overwhelmed with delight since he hadn't expected his new love interest to take the initiative in resolving his issue. They were sitting in a bar, and Clarice was sipping her cocktail languidly. "You know, you filled me with such hope. And suddenly, here comes your wife," she mused. The man was sweating from tension. "Clarice, believe me, I didn't expect this myself. She's been driving me crazy, and I don't know how to get rid of her faster." Imagine, yesterday she suddenly tells me that she's changed her mind about getting a divorce. But that's not all. She's making allegations against me, like I deceived and robbed her. What do you think of that? Joseph said. Clarice pouted. Nonsense. Could a man like you be a criminal? You're not cut out for that role, and your wife is just a shrew. Maybe you should consider more radical measures against her. Joseph tensed. What do you mean? She rolled her eyes. Come on. You're acting like a child. You said she's been ill. Lock her up in some hospital or take her somewhere and give her a sedative, then toss her in a lake. Problem solved. He looked at her with an inquisitive gaze. After a long pause, he asked, Are you willing to help me? She whispered, Of course, as long as you share with me. I want to expand my business, and I have my eye on another establishment I want to buy. Joseph even choked on his beer. You're cynical. I'll take a page out of your book. Joseph found his wife in bed. Hope looked pale. Seeing her husband, she attempted to sit up in bed. Darling, I'm feeling worse today. I even considered going to the hospital to have my blood tested, she said. The man froze in the middle of the room. Why? What have you come up with now? You're obsessed with all sorts of nonsense. No, Joseph. I read that these symptoms can occur from being poisoned with drugs that athletes use, Hope explained. Joseph started banging on the wardrobe, his frustration mounting. You're out of your mind. What are you implying? But Joseph, just think about it, she urged. I don't need to think about anything. The man paced around the room. Oh, you want to go to the hospital? Fine, get dressed. I'll take you there right now. Hope whispered, Joseph, please, don't do it. Don't burden your conscience. But Joseph was no longer moved by his wife's pleas. He roughly pushed the half-dressed woman out the door and left himself. He pushed his wife onto the back seat and took the wheel. You'll recover fast, Hope. I'm tired of your complaints. I need a normal woman, not a walking ailment, Joseph said. Where are we going, Joseph? Hope asked, but the man didn't answer. He drove the car in the direction Clarice had indicated the day before. Hope sat in the back seat and watched the road through half-open eyes. In her right hand, the woman clutched the key to the house where she would have to wait for several days. When the car arrived at the abandoned farm, Hope had lost consciousness. The man hurriedly carried her inside and into the dilapidated building. Here, my dear, you'll undergo a course of unconventional treatment, he said. Hope could hear the car driving away. She wrapped herself in a shawl and walked along the road toward the village, where lights were visible. She became quite tired and cold by the time she reached her destination. But her mind seemed to clear up. Perhaps the pure countryside there had an effect on her. As Clarice had described, she immediately found the large house based on the description. Apparently, there was nobody in it. Nevertheless, she didn't think too much about it. She decided that she would think about everything tomorrow and went to sleep. Wrapping herself up comfortably, Hope fell asleep. In the morning, she woke up feeling rather refreshed. She needed to remember everything that Clarice had told her. First, she needed to check the phone and the money, which should be on the third shelf in the cupboard. She found everything quickly, and almost immediately the phone rang. Hope. Yes, Clarice, everything is fine, Clarice said with satisfaction. See, it's all working out for us. Hope, make yourself at home, and your money should be enough for now. Don't go out too much. You know it will take time. I can't solve everything here in a day. Clarice, you know, it's quite strange. It turns out that a husband's lover is helping his wife. Well, we're breaking stereotypes, Clarice responded. Clarice, there's one more thing. I did give all the test samples, and they'll be ready tomorrow. I told the doctor I'm going on vacation, and my sister will come for them. I understand, Hope. I'll make sure to pick them up. Tell me, do you still think that Joseph? Yes, I'm almost certain of it. But if that's the case, he'll regret it very much. Hope, settle in there. By the way, find the pantry. There are plenty of supplies like mac and cheese, potatoes, and other food. Thank you, Clarice. That's it. I'll call myself when I can. Clarice hung up the phone and smiled victoriously. She was determined to help Hope and ensure that she didn't become like her mother. She placed the phone on the table and began to contemplate the next steps. Unfortunately, she was completely alone in this, and she needed to plan her actions carefully. Clarice, may I come in? Sean, her assistant, stood at the door with a friendly smile. Clarice always felt her mood improve when she saw Sean. Of course, Sean, come in. How many times do I have to ask you to just call me Clarice? I'm not 60 years old. Sean looked a bit embarrassed as he sat down. Well, it's all about professionalism. What professionalism? After all, you are my deputy, not just an ordinary employee. So let's get rid of the formalities. All right, I'll try. Clarice, I came here on business. It's just that my birthday is in 3 days, and I would like to invite you, to celebrate it with me. Clarice looked at him in surprise. Sean being bashful. This was a man who could fire anyone who got in his way. This is something new. Who else will be there? And then Sean looked her directly in the eyes and said, no one. At this point, Clarice was nearly taken aback. How was she to interpret such an invitation? She tried to respond as gently as possible. Sean, we are both adults, and I think you'll understand me. At another time, I would have gladly accepted, but right now, I can't. I have so much on my plate that I don't know how to sort it all out. Sean immediately replied, Clarice, just tell me, and I'll definitely help you. You can't do everything by yourself. A woman's duty is to be beautiful, and everything else is a man's responsibility. Clarice smiled at Sean. But you still think that way because you're young. As you get older, your perspective will change. Sean stood up. I'm only 4 years younger than you, but for some reason, you always treat me like a child. Clarice looked at her assistant in surprise. She had indeed considered Sean a handsome young man. Sean, let's not argue over trivial matters. My problems have nothing to do with our work. I promise you that as soon as I have a bit more time, I'll go somewhere with you. Sean left in silence, leaving Clarice with a sense of unease, as if she had just made a significant mistake. An hour later, she had a meeting with Joseph and needed to prepare thoroughly. Joseph was quite agitated. Clarice, it worked out perfectly, he said. I never doubted you, to be honest, she replied. We just need to wait a little longer and report her missing. I hope that by then, she'll have left this world. Joseph, haven't you considered the possibility that your wife might survive? Of course not. When I pulled her out of the car, she had already lost consciousness. It's freezing outside. What are you thinking? Oh, don't worry, it was just a thought. Joseph looked at her with gleaming eyes. Clarice, I want us to go to my place. No, I don't want to be where your wife's spirit might be lingering. How about you come to my place instead? Joseph didn't seem as perfect as he had portrayed himself. At least compared to Richard, he fell short. Clarice chided herself. The last thing I need is to compare all my lovers. Several months passed, and Joseph grew tired of filing reports to have his wife declared deceased. Don't you understand that to have a missing person declared dead, at least 5 years must pass? In your case, it hasn't even been 6 months, he was told. But she was ill. Many can confirm that, Joseph argued. It doesn't matter. It's different if a body is found, but in this case, it hasn't been. He desperately slammed the office door, yearning for freedom. Joseph was eager to marry Clarice. He understood that Clarice was not like his wife. She was strong and independent, and he was determined to conquer that fortress. He knew that a young woman like Clarice could slip away at any moment. Clarice was sitting in her office when Sean walked in without knocking. She raised an eyebrow in surprise, but her deputy silently placed a sheet of paper in front of her and made the lead. Clarice quickly skimmed the paper. A resignation letter. Sean, stop. He paused. Why? Do I not pay you enough? Let's talk about it. I can increase your salary, she offered. It's not necessary, he replied. Sean avoided her gaze. Then it dawned on Clarice. Is this because I declined to go to the restaurant with you? He gave her a smile. Not entirely. Then I don't understand. Sean took a step forward. I'm not resigning just because I didn't go with you to the restaurant. Clarice was genuinely baffled, wondering what had gotten into Sean's head. You see, Clarice, I did go to the restaurant as I had planned. I went alone, thinking I'd celebrate my birthday by myself. Imagine my surprise when, at the next table, I saw my boss with that former boxer. You were whispering so tenderly that you didn't even notice me. And you weren't exactly keeping your voices down when discussing what you'd done to that guy, the wife of that muscle head. Your place is behind bars. I hope you understand, but I'm not the judge. I just don't want to work with you anymore. Clarice smiled lightly. Sit down, Sean. We need to talk. She suddenly found herself not wanting this sincere guy to think badly of her. Sean shook his head in disagreement, but Clarice had to raise her voice. Sean, so you judge a person without even listening to them? Sean sighed and took a seat. I heard everything with my own ears, nevertheless. Clarice took a seat in front of him. Well, I'll start from the beginning. So please be patient, she said. On her first day, Hope got acquainted with her neighbors, an elderly couple who not only welcomed her warmly but refrained from asking unnecessary questions. At the outset, they inquired about her connection to Clarice, to which Hope promptly replied that she had simply rented the house to improve her health. The topic was never revisited. You know, Hope, any illnesses just melt away in a rural sauna. You'll see for yourself how much better you'll feel after a steam, Patricia advised. Hope smiled, having heard and read a lot about rural saunas but had never been to one herself, assuming it must be as hot as people describe. One evening, Patricia led her to the sauna, and Hope emerged practically crawling. She thought her end had come, but after a brief rest, she felt an incredible surge of energy. A week later, an unfamiliar woman appeared at her doorstep. She entered without knocking, as if she owned the place. So, who are you? Hope stood up. And who are you? I'm Judy, your Aunt Judy. Clarice sold the house, and she didn't say a word to me. She was supposed to sell it to me, that heartless woman. Hope felt flustered and then replied, Don't worry, Clarice didn't sell anything. I'm just renting the house temporarily to recover from an illness. Judy gave Hope a suspicious look. You're not lying. No, why would I? What's the point? I came here to get some fresh air and regain my strength after an illness. Without saying goodbye, Judy slammed the door. Hope shrugged. A rather strange woman. Fresh air, wholesome food, and, of course, the sauna did their magic. In a few months, Hope was no longer a shadow of herself. She not only looked better but also felt her confidence growing. She considered visiting her husband. Occasionally, Clarice called her and told her that he still couldn't get a divorce. Besides, Hope's name was still on the apartment. Clarice sat at the table with Sean across from her. Clarice, I can't stand watching you with that scumbag. Sean, we agreed on this, she replied. Yes, I remember. But when will it end? Clarice looked at him with interest. Well, it will end, for example, when it's over. And then what? Sean abruptly turned to her. Clarice, are you pretending, or perhaps you really don't understand? Clarice wanted to believe that her thoughts were right, but she knew that all men were essentially the same. Why should Sean be any different? She immediately scolded herself and thought that it wasn't right. It was entirely possible that Sean was different, and that meant, well, it didn't mean anything. No matter how she looked at it, she was older than Sean and had experienced much more in her life. He was young, pure, and good. He surely didn't need someone like her. Sean sat in front of her once again. Can I try to guess what you're thinking right now? Clarice smiled. Go ahead. You think that nothing can work out between us, he said. Clarice stopped smiling. And do you think it can? He took her hands in his. Not only can it, it will, as soon as you're done with your current situation. Sean, It's not that simple. You're mistaken. It's very simple, and there's no need to build up these strange barriers. There are two people who could be happy together, but some conventions are standing in their way. John left, and Clarice pondered how she wanted to picture herself with Sean, to imagine that she had a normal family, that they had a child, and that she loved the child deeply, not just raised them out of necessity. Clarice shook her head. No, this wasn't about her. She couldn't even think about having a child. What if after the child's birth, she became just like her mother? Clarice picked up the phone. Joseph, hi, any plans for the evening? He chuckled on the other end of the line. Plans, as always, to be with you. Clarice frowned. She was already tired of him and his constant presence. Joseph had no concept of personal space. Just the other day, he suggested that they should live together. Clarice protested. Why is that? I'm perfectly fine with how we are. You're at your place, and I'm at mine, and we don't owe anything to each other. Joseph squinted his eyes. You're mistaken right now. Don't forget that the idea of leading Hope to her doom was our joint venture, so we are bound together forever. Clarice didn't like this perspective at all, and she realized that it was time to take action. Joseph, I was thinking, maybe we should go to a restaurant. It's been a while since we've been out. What a great idea. Which one? Clarice named a few restaurants and called Sean. She was a little nervous, and Joseph picked up on it. What's wrong with you? You seem a bit jittery today. I don't know. It's just a strange premonition. Come on. Don't think about anything when I'm with you. You know that nothing can threaten you when I'm around. Joseph smiled and shrugged. He made sure to look around to gauge people's reactions to his presence and suddenly froze. Clarice waited for a moment and asked, Joseph, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. He shook his head and turned a frightened look towards her. You could say that. Look to the right, the third table. Clarice turned her head, glanced at the couple sitting there, and then turned back to Joseph. Yes, I see my deputy sitting there with some young woman. But why did Sean startle you like this? Sean. To hell with Sean. Look who's sitting next to him. Clarice turned again and then said, someone unfamiliar. Although the face seems somewhat familiar. That's my wife, Hope. Clarice exclaimed. What? Have you gone mad? You said she wouldn't survive. I thought the same, but as you can see, she's alive and quite healthy. Clarice grabbed a trembling napkin and said, Joseph, dear God, what should we do now? What about you? Me? Of course, you understand that now that she's alive. She might go to the police and tell them everything you did back then. How you dragged her into the car. How you left her. Joseph glared at Clarice. Shut up. You're guilty too. You advised this course of action. Me? Clarice widened her eyes. What do I have to do with this? You're her husband, and you decided to get rid of her by any means necessary. Joseph didn't get a chance to respond because the couple in question approached their table. Hello. Joseph slowly got up. Hope. The woman smirked and said, I can see that you didn't expect to see me. I'm glad I've shaken you up a bit. Joseph, I hope you understand that I'm planning to go to the police. Joseph looked at Clarice, who anxiously blinked her eyes and foolishly asked Hope, haven't you been there yet? Sean and Hope exchanged glances, and Sean began. So far, Hope hasn't gone anywhere. We consulted and decided to give you a chance. As you can understand, serving a lengthy sentence for such a crime isn't appealing, but we can offer an alternative. What's the alternative? Joseph knew that he probably wouldn't like what they were about to say. Going to prison was something he really wanted to avoid. The more he looked at Hope, the more he realized that this was not the same Hope he could easily intimidate. This new Hope looked at him calmly and confidently. It seemed the assistant of Clarice was providing her with the support she needed. You return everything you took from me within 3 days, or we go to the police, Hope said calmly. Joseph smirked. You're lying. Go ahead, you won't prove anything. Hope slowly took a piece of paper from her bag. It contained her medical records, showing which medications were given to her to expedite her departure from this world. As you can see, once they start digging, they'll find more than enough evidence for a substantial prison term. John took Hope's arm and looked at Clarice. I think you need to talk. Your lover, pardon me, friend needs to make the right decision. Clarice thought to herself, well, Sean, there shouldn't have been that word in his speech. And especially nobody should talk to her with such a focus on the word lover. They walked away, and Joseph wiped the sweat from his forehead. Clarice, what should we do? She looked at him in fear. What should we do? You're hesitating again. Of course, we need to give them everything. How can I give it all away? What will be left for me? Clarice pulled him closer. You're such a fool. You'll have your freedom left. And why do I need freedom? If I have nothing, you'll kick me out right away. Clarice looked at him in surprise, saying, how could you ever think that? Besides, this way we can finally get married. We'll expand my business, and you'll find something to do as well. Joseph gazed at her with admiration and said, Clarice, you're simply magical. Let him choke on it. I'll give the order to prepare the papers first thing in the morning. And for now, let's go to your place. Clarice frowned, saying, Joseph, you can see how I'm feeling. It's no less of a shock for me, believe me. So let's first deal with the problem. Joseph sighed. Of course, Clarice, you're right as always. I'll take you. No, Joseph, I'll get a taxi. I want to be alone. See you tomorrow. Clarice quickly left the restaurant and rushed to catch a cab. She entered the building and slowly began to ascend. I wonder if Sean and Hope have already gone their separate ways, or perhaps they decided to celebrate their victory together. Both young and beautiful. This thought didn't sit well with Clarice at all. She was so angry that she even punched the railing. Well, to hell with them. Who are you scolding? Yourself, a voice suddenly said. Clarice startled and looked up. Sean was leaning casually against the railing near her apartment. He was smiling, and Clarice suddenly thought that she had the right to be happy for at least one night. The woman silently made her way up, opened the door, and froze. Sean looked at her without a smile and walked inside. In the morning, they were woken up by the phone call. Clarice, call your deputy, that jerk, and ask where we'll be signing the documents. Sean was listening closely to their conversation, and Clarice struggled to suppress a smile. Joseph, stop being so nervous. I'll find out everything and call you back. She barely had time to hang up when she found herself in a tight embrace. I don't want any paperwork, Clarice said with a chuckle. Sean, be serious. You have a very important mission. The man leaned back on the pillows and looked at her seriously. Clarice, will you marry me? Clarice froze. It seemed that no one had ever spoken such words to her before. She remained silent, and Sean spoke again. I would give up a lot to know what's going on in your head right now. But I'll never have that privilege. Let's do this. Once we finish our business, you'll think about it. As soon as Hope no longer needs our help, you'll give me an answer. Clarice nodded and let out a relieved sigh. She would have gladly shouted yes, but most likely it would have been wrong. They had so little in common. Sean was so good, and she was not the same. The document transfer went perfectly. Hope barely spoke to her husband, communicating only with Joseph, the notary. This greatly irritated him. It seemed that if Hope talked to him, he could regain control over her. Over the night, Joseph had developed an entire plan on how to make his wife fall in love with him again and persuade her to stay. Transforming her back into her previous self would be a piece of cake. However, Hope didn't even look at him as if he were a nonentity. He was not happy that Clarice and this young man, her deputy, were sitting together on chairs, as if there was something more between them than just work. Although they were supposed to be real enemies now, he felt that something was off here. But what? Clarice would soon become his wife, and he would manage her business. Perhaps he would even confine her within four walls to prevent any further concern or annoyance. All right, Clarice, let's go, he said. Joseph gazed at Clarice, who didn't seem inclined to get up. "Clarice, do you hear me?" "Yes, of course I hear you. I just don't understand why you're talking to me in that tone." Everyone was looking at him, Hope, her assistant, and Clarice herself. "Clarice, stop fooling around. I've just lost everything. And here you are, staging a drama." He started walking toward Clarice, intending to take her by the hand and lead her away. Didn't she understand what he was going through right now? But Sean stepped in his way. Joseph narrowed his eyes. "Get out of the way. I need to take my woman with me." Sean smirked. "She's not your woman. In fact, there are no women belonging to you here. You've returned what didn't belong to you. You should have been behind bars, and not just losing something. You should be on your knees thanking both Clarice and Hope." "What do you mean, Clarice?" Joseph stepped back, finally realizing what had just happened. "So it's you. You orchestrated all of this." He roared and lunged towards Clarice, but Sean's fist quickly put him down. Joseph hadn't expected anyone to stand in his way, so he clumsily missed the blow. He didn't get a chance to retaliate before the security team restrained him. When Joseph was taken away, the three of them walked out onto the street. "I suggest we celebrate this," Clarice said with a smile. "I'm in." Hope supported the idea. "Me too." They chose a cozy little cafe. Sean was a bit nervous, and as soon as they sat down, he asked, "Clarice, are you ready to give me an answer?" Hope watched them with interest, not entirely sure what was happening right now. 6 months later, the beautiful and ethereal Hope stood next to Clarice. For the first time in her life, Clarice was terribly nervous. She had to walk just a few meters to where Sean was waiting for her. She had cast aside all her doubts and decided to defy everyone by being happy. And now she was happy. So happy that she was only afraid of one thing: losing this happiness, failing to preserve it. An hour later, everyone shouted and congratulated the newlyweds. Hope whispered to Clarice, "Clarice, I'm getting married too." Clarice looked at her in surprise. To whom? She had missed something, blinded by her own happiness. "How? To whom?" "You see, the son of your neighbor Patricia came to visit." Clarice twirled her former rival, who was now her friend, around. "Hope, I'm so happy for you." "Clarice, I wanted to ask, will you be my bridesmaid?" Clarice laughed. "No, Hope. And don't be offended. I won't fit into any dresses in a few months." John overheard the last words and gently touched his wife's hand. "Clarice, are you talking about what I'm thinking?" "John, you eavesdropped." He laughed and picked up his wife. "Who cares? The most important thing is that I heard something I didn't even dare dream of." Hope smiled, watching them. And in her heart, she really hoped to say the same words